One evening at the holistic school I attended as a young adult, our instructor had us all tie pendulums to the middle of a hanger. We were instructed to hold the hanger and imagine the pendulum swinging. Picture it moving back and forth, but make sure to keep your hand completely still. Sure enough, everyone in the room became telekinetic within minutes. Amazing. I, being a Debbie Downer, told everyone they were subtly shifting the position of the hanger, even though it had appeared to stay still. I received some snide comments about my faith and belief. The presentation ended with a subtle jab not to miss the point, which I must have, and the sentiment that it had all been used for example purposes, which I can only assume I missed. The group quickly changed the subject after I had wagered my Mazda MX-6 to the first person who could do the same thing, hanging the hanger off of the coat rack. Remove one ingredient from the recipe at a time and split test what remains. While working with and interning at the Holistic Center, I did benefit greatly from much of what I learned. The teachings of Ram Dass I've mentioned were particularly instrumental, but let me say firmly, before the midnight train catches up with Jesus, the Buddha, Maharaji, and company, that Mesonoxia is not New Age pseudoscience. The themes presented in Mesonoxia are as old as time itself. While I borrow from many traditions and insights, both spiritual and scientific, there are truly no black boxes in Mesonoxia. Nothing mysterious, nothing on faith alone. After a recent Mesonopera life choreography session, a friend suggested I study a well-known New Age doctor. We will call him Dr. Bronson Plimpton, to be nice. My client believed that Dr. Plimpton had been paving inroads to a couple of the concepts I had been explaining to him with Mesonoxia. If you aren't familiar, Dr. quote-unquote Plimpton, a biologist, a geneticist, proposes to prove that what we believe about genetics is all wrong and that our perceptions influence our genetic code much more than physical reality, if physical reality plays a role at all. Dr. Plimpton is a shrewd marketer and feeds a New Age audience exactly the themes they already cherish, using snapshots of science. He uses a grab bag of scientific laws for his rationale and also claims a, quote-unquote zero black boxes explanation for his interpretation. His fans can be found online claiming that he has disproven Darwinism, among other things. Dr. Plimpton misrepresents what the scientific community actually teaches, however. He plays on a layman's ignorance of cellular biology and society's cliched and unsophisticated understanding of scientific terms. He also uses a subtle play on words to make connections that are truly inside the black box. What I mean is, there is no direct link in his chain of reasoning any more than a squirrel's nest is to him a home, but for you and I, a pile of twigs and some mud isn't something we can live in. Let me explain. Dr. Plimpton goes into a long lecture with moments of passionate salesmanship to mask the black boxes at key times. I can't knock his sales and marketing skill, but the science leaves a lot to be desired. He claims, for example, that when a scientist says there is a cancer gene, that the scientists and society as a whole believe that cancer is predetermined. He states that this is obviously untrue because had it been true, then a baby born with the cancer gene would immediately begin to develop cancer. What scientists actually mean when they refer to a cancer gene, however, is that when a cell comes into contact with toxic material or cancerous conditions, the organism may be more prone to developing cancer based on its genetic makeup. Plimpton's most earth-shattering revelation resides in his claim that the nucleus of the cell is but a repository of blueprints, but does not control the cell and is not the brain of the cell, as he states scientists view it. He professes that your perception influences what is in the repository, and thus, through your perception, you can control your genetic destiny in this physical way. This might in fact, be truth for all we know, and my aim here is not really to argue that one way or another, but rather to point out that his logic doesn't stand up to the acid test of the no black box claim. It is here where the awareness of his subtle use of word choice unravels the entire argument. Plimpton goes into a lengthy explanation of the membrane of the cell and how it is like our skin, which perceives its environment. He explains how each cell has a nervous system, an endocrine system, digestive system, etc. He makes a subtle comparison as to how we are all basically just big cells. This is somewhat accurate as far as comparisons go, but not exact science. The doctor gets most excited at times when these links are necessary for the absorption of his reasoning. He gets particularly fired up when asking us, so what controls the cell? Perception! As if there was absolutely zero substantive difference between a cell membrane perceiving, like radioactive waste in its environment, your body, from your mental perception as to whether or not you perceive having cancer. Therein lies the huge black box. Perhaps your mental perception, stress, etc., may influence the cell's environment, chemical makeup of your body in which cells exist. Although we are now on much shakier grounds in terms of proving direct causation, and I guess if anything it makes for a nice musing or meditation or metaphor, but the stimulus for the cell, e.g. the, let's say, toxic waste, isn't at the whim of our mental perception, obviously. Whether or not Plimpton knows that this is the critical point which the balance of his lecture rests on is not my job to speculate on. However, if I give him the benefit of the doubt, I am genuinely frightened for humanity to think that this man passed medical school with this type of juvenile reasoning. It appears to me that by getting excited at the key times and by vocally fading in and out during his seminar in a chaotic, somewhat hypnotic delivery pattern, and while knowing just exactly what the themes his audience wishes to hear are, like any crafty preacher, Plimpton allows one to read into his lecture what they wish. When he gets down into what his fans call debunking Darwin, he uses this rationale. In the late 80s, a paradigm-shattering paper came out wherein scientists had bacteria in 5 separate petri dishes and applied some type of stimulus. In all 5 dishes, the genetic variations were the same, leading the doctor to get very excited again as he asks, where's the random mutation in that? This is actually the most ironic statement in the entire presentation, as it specifically disproves his thesis. If we correctly understand what the scientific community asserts about random mutation, it isn't that the bacteria would change randomly when hit with the mechanism. It is that the bacteria would be hit with random different mechanisms or stimulus, thus changing randomly based on what it encountered in the world. If what he said earlier were true, that it was perception that caused the change, then each petri dish could come out different based on the way it perceived the stimulus. They each changed in the same way because perception, as he correctly asserted in the first instance, was the physical act of the cell membrane being introduced to the stimulus and going back into the repository, nucleus, for what to do with it. And while the repository didn't do the acting and controlling itself in a physical way, it was one part of the 2-part combination which unequivocally determined the result. The result was not based on any subjective, mysterious, nor mystical perception, which is of course why the entire argument is a huge black box. By playing loose with our perception of words he is using and lack of discriminative awareness of the general layman, Dr. quote-unquote Bronson Plimpton proposes dangerous ideas for the average person who, upon acceptance of his themes, distrusts science and opts for crackpot quack cures when they do get sick. Then, they may believe their illnesses have metaphysical or supernatural causes rather than understanding they may have poor diets, for their body types, or genetics. In the most reductio ad absurdum of Mesonoxia and faultless logic as I can muster, consider this. If what Dr. Plimpton said were true, then should you hallucinate or go batshit nuts and perceive you can fly, your cells would kick into action and start mutating to give you wings. No, this is obviously not how it works. The cause of flight is still a mystery, but some likely scenarios include the resultant adaptation of gliders or perhaps leaping fowl sustaining flight at first for just a moment and gradually, through selection, becoming stronger. Or maybe even the long shot of, mating and posturing leading to larger feathers. But whatever it was, perception, being the sole agonist, can probably be ruled out. I'm sorry to be a Denny Downer, but, whether you want to do a juice therapy or whatever, you should probably still trust the chemo more than your magical perception. This doesn't mean that the brain isn't incapable of some amazing feats, however. I shouldn't say the brain specifically, however, as really I just mean life. Consider that there was a time during which cells took millions of years to develop messenger molecules like acetylcholine and norepinephrine. Much time has passed before the early receptors were able to take energy from light waves and transform them into nerve impulses. The rhodopsin receptor once had other shit to do. Sometimes people wonder why anyone would read old spiritual texts for insight. They think that they must have been written by a more primitive intellect, but in truth, it was just a different type of intelligence. Evolution isn't necessarily always a positive. If rhodopsin had taken on another job, it may have been advantageous to the organism in some way, but perhaps not as beneficial as sight. Imagining a time when there was no sight makes it easy to see that perhaps we are still evolving spiritually, and a new type of awareness not yet imaginable on a grand scale may yet be possible for mankind, even if we aren't ready or capable of knowing what that might be. So I don't want the reader to think I am suggesting the only possibilities are those we know currently as Western rational materialists. But all still functions within the material, even if we don't perceive it as such because it is so far outside our current reality. In much the same way that the benefit of sight, sound, taste, and perception would seem spooky and mystical, mysterious to anything without those faculties, a new and illuminated potential for man may be coming. But it is no more magical than the cuttlefish that can change color and shape on a dime like a superhero, or a bird that can fly. If you had never seen a creature take flight, it would seem equally miraculous. When people espouse that this type of thinking can instantly be relied upon in desperate circumstances, however, common sense, for their immediate relevance, must kick into gear. Far too often we think too simplistically about new information presented to us. For example, first we learn that a diet high in vegetables, beans, and whole grains may help lower our cholesterol. But it isn't so much that they lower our cholesterol as it is that they don't add to it. It is that they are being substituted for the same nutrients you might find in meat without the added cholesterol, saturated fat, or whatever the study of the week is that is being used to sell us a new product. Then the commercial becomes, eat this to lower your cholesterol. And finally, we have removed a critical piece of the context. Instead of A plus B equals C, the commercial touts A equals C. More accurately, A minus B equals C. Or most accurately, A in substitution of B equals C. People take no consideration for the totality of the elements. Much more on this in Bone Picking, Noxious Confession, and Political Concoctions. Back to the main point about positive thinking. It isn't just the New Age types who buy into these types of fantasies and limited logic, however. It is developed into an almost universal pop acceptance. At a gala event in Princeton, New Jersey, at the governor's mansion, I had the unfortunate experience of listening to a representative from the Lance Armstrong Foundation speak to a large group before fielding questions. This was before Lance had been caught doping and the foundation was in gung-ho positivist, cancer-killing awareness raising forum. After listening to the emotional and impassioned lecture on how to support your loved ones should they become sick, I asked what I thought was a poignant and relevant question. To the chagrin of my supervisor, this was a work function after all, and all about politics and good show. This wasn't the time for fruitful discussion. But I, however, being unapologetic and uncompromising in my will to never leave goddamn well enough alone, when else might I get an opportunity to influence hundreds of healthcare professionals on a pertinent topic related to their livelihood? I asked the speaker if he could speak to what I had seen, namely that many people who were dying of cancer felt not only that they had to deal with their imminent mortality, but now also with the added stress of being made to feel like quitters among the positively delusional bandwagon of self-help guru miracle thought quackery. Now they had to deal with the added guilt of letting down their all-day positive, well-meaning friends and family, as if they simply couldn't summon the strength to stay positive and believe their disease was somehow no match for their spirit. Everyone around them subtly and subconsciously buying into this pseudo-scientific positivity horseshit was now adding to the misery of the experience. I am not suggesting that there is anything inherently wrong with staying positive. Hell, it might even have some health-inducing properties. Perhaps stress hormones give cancer replication added fuel, who knows? But when the medicine reacts one way with your condition, lifestyle, or genetics, etc., and still another way with your neighbors, publicly chalking up the favorable outcome in one instance to your warrior spirit may in fact be a tad too pretentious for reality, and also may be doing many people more harm than good. Not everything in life is positive, nor does it lead to something positive. Not everything in life can even be used as cause or motivation for others to be inspired by. Sometimes positivism and naive optimism can simply cause heartache, frustration, and even death. My question may have been glossed over by the speaker, but I am unflinchingly certain that it was heard in full by the room. In the end, we found out where the doping Lance Armstrong put his trust for gold. Science. While we delve into the outreaches of the mind, mesonoxia should not be confused with illogical madness. This is not the secret. The real secret, the middle way eclectic insight, is the discriminative awareness that allows you to see through all that shit. This is the courage to reduce it all to the absurd, regardless of the emotional buzz in the air. This is the eclectic wisdom that shows you the truth in all circumstances. Mesonoxia is the power and not so humble confidence at times that allows one to learn from all stimuli while remaining the adult in the room, no matter the room. For those familiar with my writing, when we say you will reign over everything, we are speaking in practical terms. But I am alluding more to a type of invulnerability than invincibility. No one will be able to pull the wool over your eyes so easily because your spectral vision glasses will hone in like a laser on the card that brings down the house. Mesonoxia is the awareness that perceives in all dimensions. But when we say dimensions, however, we aren't talking spooky string theory dimensions. We mean actual physical dimensions. So when someone shows you a house of cards or a 2D cutout, you walk around it and observe it from another angle, where the illusion fails, the house of cards falls, the mirage, the hoax, the black box, all evaporate. I don't mean to or intend to take shots, simply or only at the establishment. With my friend, maybe I hadn't been making that clear enough. I could have gotten much more money out of him if I were willing to lead him on a wild goose chase searching for esoteric truth contingent on his perception. This commitment is to truth, however, not consistency or quackery. When I say I'm a little nuts, I am certainly telling the truth by society's definition of nuts, but I'm a little nuts and a lot kidding around. While establishing that mesonoxia isn't your grandfather's religion or a religion at all, it should also be said that it isn't your crackpot uncle's New Age a la carte buffet. This isn't the law of attraction, it always baffles me observing the prosperity psychology that the pastors and New Age alike profess faith in. They deny the zero-sum game of the material world. They talk Jesus but practice Satanism. The secret, by definition, is synonymous with the occult. I'm not saying you should be one or the other, but get your story straight. There's no submission to God's will while commanding and seeking the power of intention be used toward your own selfish indulgences of materialism. The idea that if you profess privately or publicly in the power of your Lord, that he then turns and blesses you with material wealth or good fortune of any kind, that is a favoritism on his part over the other creatures and people around you in this giant competition, a game show of cars and boats, a symbol of everything it has done for you, but for whatever reason has not done for others, an incessant championing of might makes right, because, how did might get that way? It's a variation of the caste system, in which your lot in life is determined by some external thing, the difference being only the degree of your involvement with this external thing. Then, the idea of giving all your success up to this external entity acts as a demonstration of humility is profoundly ridiculous in that it represents your self-professed means of accomplishing and accumulating more of them. The big split between Christianity, or any Orthodox religion for that matter, and their mystical counterparts is on the idea that you have anything to do with it. Islam is focused even stronger on this premise, on the backs of Christians doing whatever the hell they wanted and calling it God's will, but it goes both ways. I'm not saying any of it is correct or incorrect, just that if you reject the mystical experience, the idea that you too can get to go the trip and be enlightened, be like Jesus or Buddha, know the mind of God, that you can then turn around and use the Force for any type of personal gain, the two things are inconsistent. You're either using magic or you're not. On YouTube today, you can find many lectures on Hermeticism, ancient Egypt, Neoplatonism, and Gnosis, but everyone still holds tight to the idea of the supernatural and superstitious. Wicca, the occult, magic, Kabbalah, Islam, and their focus on divine numerology, or Freemasonry, they can all show you the sacred geometry. Whether or not the pyramids were built using levers or pulleys, through levitation of stone, through timing of polar shifts and positioning of ley lines and magnetic energy. If you understand what they want you to, then you would understand that magic isn't magical. It's just science that contemporary science doesn't understand. But what does it help? If we levitate a block, so what? How could that make our lives better today? It is supposed to get you to a place where the metaphysical and the physical lack a relevant distinction. If there is a science to the soul, or there isn't, the implication is that an earlier civilization had it all figured out. Then all they would have figured out is, this does this, and that does that. Spoiler alert, the pyramids were cast like concrete. Chemistry, alchemy, same thing. Fax machines are like telekinesis. Talking on the phone to someone across the world would be miraculous to an earlier society. Our positive thinking is superstitious thinking in spooky forces. But whether real or not, if the forces are real, there's a reason that can be understood. Hence, gnosis, knowledge, is all there is. The pyramids are miraculous in that the geometry of their size and dimensions line up with the speed of light and Ellis Island and all that. But it's just a piece of art, like the Mona Lisa, the unification of all knowledge as a structure or a painting or whatever. If the Egyptians had anything else to offer us in terms of science, they probably would have found something else lasting to write on besides stones and blocks. Everyone gets so carried away, and that's what they want you to do. They want to lead you on a goose chase after you discover, religion or your religion or whatever is, a little incomplete. But it's no big deal. It's just an art form from intelligent people who are good at math and want to believe in their own superiority. This is why Jesus said the man who knows everything but does not know himself knows nothing. The only truly positive thinking is accurate thinking. People are so superstitious, they've forgotten what superstition really is. It's a belief in magic, where no matter what philosophy, religion, science, or psychology they ascribe to, they are delusional, seeking something externally while thinking of it as internal, a yearning for a quality that is outside the realm of direct cause and effect that can be relied upon through the mechanics of mind. Yes, the streets of Washington, D.C. form a hexagram. Yes, the Masons have been constructing buildings for centuries using the same hermetic knowledge that was used in Stonehenge. It is not all such a federal case, however. It's just a bunch of intellectual hoops to jump through so that egomaniacs can feel like they have bestowed the secret of life upon you as a way of gaining your allegiance into the guild of architectural, existential, choreographic poetry. Very much like our institutions of higher learning. It's all just a way to divide people into camps of proverbial sheep or cattle. Sociopathic symbolism is noticeable in the events and movies you see on television. I'm not going to talk at all in this book about just, any conspiracy at all, okay? What's a hoax, what isn't? It's all, our everyday lives have become a hoax. But people know it intuitively. To spend time arguing facts about what happened that can be argued back and rewritten will never beat the machine. Our entire lives have become a hoax. We don't combat any of it by arguing the details. We combat it by making something else more interesting to all parties. We don't have to have chemtrails poison everyone so Monsanto can monopolize the world with resistant seeds. We could just stop having 90 million children. I volunteer. Don't kill them. Is Jesus the martyr for the world, or is the world the martyr for Jesus? The alchemist turning lead into gold is just like a metaphor for the spiritual journey of the white or red magician, or the sales technique of the black. It's just all the intention behind your power of intention. While nothing metaphysical is happening. More accurately, anything that is beyond the physical is on some level physical. If it exists, it exists. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Gravity, magnetism, sound waves, and whatever else we might discover still operate lawfully and exist both physically and metaphysically, though we don't think about them in spooky terms. What's the difference? The New Age is obsessed with the vibrational frequencies of your consciousness, a term which they have now turned into a noun, much like the religious have done to God. Everyone is out to lunch. They may be in different restaurants, but they're eating the same crap. No one isolates the composite parts. Many Christians I know actually demonstrate satanic beliefs through their positive thinking, but don't understand nor care to understand either one, and have simply bought into this prosperity pseudo-pop psychology of their time. This here, however, is for anyone who wants to do things more efficiently, understand and gauge things more precisely, plan things exponentially, feel things more poignantly, pursue things ergonomically, and live this life exquisitely. Even when people talk conspiracies, they're buying into a story whose end has already been written by a thought form much older than our individual lives. Whether you are the victim or the victor, you're a pawn in someone else's tale. Even in talking against it, you strengthen it through your involvement, as the drowning out and reassembling will be done in your absence. You don't exist. Your immortal soul is a carbon copy. As the non-prophets, we aren't anti-establishment or anti-anything. We are spokespersons for the absence of something. Your own idea, a new primary color. When you go out into the world, you have to create art that says something. You have to convince your captors to see something different. It's just not the, sheep sitting next to you that needs convincing. It is accomplished through ambiguity, the middle way. It is coded, then painted over. So you need to split the difference to allow the truth to hang around. You need to be able to talk to everyone. So you need to understand everyone. As long as you are only reading one book, It doesn't matter, the book, so much as what you're not reading. That's the true saving grace of Jesus, as talked about in the Synoptic Gospels, but demonstrated in Thomas. A life as an art form, a pyramid, a picture. Everyone wants cures. No one wants prevention. Everyone wants to go on their merry way and have someone else solve their problem for them. No one wants any responsibility beyond positive thinking, prayer, and magic beans. The deepest level of compassion encompasses an incessant sadness. If you ask me if I am joyful or happy, sure, I'm happy. Life is pretty good. I have a lot to be grateful for. But if you ask me if I'm sad, of course I am sad. With so much misery and suffering in the world, how can I not be? The present includes both. To be only positive all day is somewhat selfish, or requires a lack of engagement in the world. When you meet people who are either, sometimes they're born again, I don't mean to knock them, but, or new age, or whatever makes a person incessantly happy and bubbly and boisterous, they almost always seem a little delusional. They aren't really alive or fully awake. They're shallow. Yeah, it sounds great. Be positive. Think positive. Rah, rah, rah. The great sages of our times, when you look at any of them, Gandhi, Dr. King, Vivekananda, they are passionate and engaged, but not deliriously joyful and optimistic 24/7. They're always deeply concerned with the issues of their time. Today we have kind of moved past women's rights, civil rights, now gay rights, and then of course there's still a lot to be done in some of these areas, but the real awakening of our planet will be part and parcel of animal rights. That's when we have made the shift that we aren't so special. That is when we as a species have kind of tamed our cumulative ego and embraced our role as the stewards we were always capable of being, like in Isaiah. I don't want it to be a law so much as a choice not taken. In the same way that we will never really prevent bigotry through laws or laws alone, the change comes when people simply understand it is wrong. Animal liberation isn't the topic of this chapter, but one we'll discuss later. It does provide a good example, though, given the discussion on positive thinking. In my compassion, driving to work each morning and seeing them lying dead in the road, I am aware that that bird is someone's lover, their mate. I see the same birds together every morning in my backyard. The possum in the shoulder is someone's mother. When I see all the travesties on the internet, and I get some of it's blown out of proportion and PETA gets a little carried away, but the factory farming and animal abuse, and I watch the ignorant vanity walking down the street draped in fur. How can I not be incessantly sad? If you are happy in the midst of such horrible conditions for both animals and humans, you are either tuned out or incredibly self-centered. And yet I only get one life and I don't want to spend it miserable. So how do we strike a balance? It does us no good to spend part of our day grieving and part of it turning our head the other way, as even many engaged citizens of Earth do. Rather than going back and forth like a yo-yo, the wisest among us seem to find a place where they are simultaneously both. That place is what true compassion means. Think Jesus. When I envision Jesus through the words and teachings ascribed to him, both in the New Testament and other less-known Gospels, I can sense a type of desperation, equanimity, and quietude accompanied by a deep love that grieves at the very same moment. That is where you will find the kingdom. When you meet people who are truly deep, profound, intelligent, and caring, you find a striking depth behind the eyes, contrasted with when you meet people who are bubbling with positivity. You often sense a really weak, shallow emptiness behind the eyes. The yearn to feed people, be it physically, mentally, or spiritually, comes from knowing hunger and pain in each respect in a very poignant, sharp, biting way. The deep, wise ones always seem to emanate a tinge of pain along with a depth of agape. You'll just notice it. The trick is, if you met the Buddha, you would see a complexity behind the eyes, an equanimity with both a paradoxical joy and pain. It is neither male nor female, yin or yang. It's the Mona Lisa. That's the one. The ones who appear overly optimistic and joyful ad nauseum are always the ones who break down the hardest when life throws them a curveball. The inevitability of death, suffering, and grief on this planet seems to hit them the hardest. The futility of their outlook eventually catches up with them. And the effort they put forth in their spiritual materialism, their intention to keep up appearances, to look like the Buddha, or behave as they believe Jesus did, full of love that is not agape, not unconditional, but a farce, wears down their spirit until it is devoid of the will to carry on. It is not the true samadhi, nor is it recommended for a happy, healthy life. When you look at the futility of our times in so many respects, when you look at how much misery in the world is completely unnecessary, and when you couple that with the concepts you will learn in this volume, there is a tendency to become nihilistic at first, a natural inclination to say, what does it all mean? What is the point? But the truly compassionate will look to each day as an opportunity to serve the beloved in all its distressing disguises. The mesonoperative keeps death over his left shoulder, and you will notice in times of great stress as a rock of comfort to those around him or her. It isn't such a shock to the system. Those who don't have love for all of God's creation and would treat part of it as a commodity while putting on a happy face are not agents of my Father's kingdom. Going to your happy place will be the cause of continued and future suffering. But Mother Nature's on the mound. Father Time is in the bullpen and will catch up with all of us soon enough. But don't get it twisted. Whether you're hoping to avoid cancer or usher in a new age, you'll find the straight no doping answer in an orangey red reward stored in the kitchen. Just guard your grill, one way or the other, be it near the plate or up on stage. For this Jersey Devil Red GMO tomato, Club Mother Nature will be pitching with Mesonoxia.